Hello everyone, welcome to Pathways for Preventing War and Promoting Peace, a conversation with young people on 5 different continents. We're so happy to have you join us here today. The purpose of today is to really share the narratives and listen to young people who tell us in their own words some of the barriers and opportunities for preventing war and promoting peace. This particular recording is done in partnership with and for Geneva Peace Week, and the recording interview is created by World Beyond War. We're so excited to have 5 wonderful young people join us from 5 different continents, and we're going to be introducing those young people shortly. To start with, what we want to do is give you a bit of a context for what's going to be covered today. And in order to do this, I'm going to be sharing the screen to give you a sense of where we're going. So our time together will be split into 3 main parts. First of all, we're going to be starting off giving a bit of a context with regards to youth and peace and security. Next, we're going to hear from young people, and this is going to really be the bulk of our work here today. We're going to hear from young people around their perspectives related to peace and war issues. And there's going to be time as well for questions and answers. In terms of the purpose, it's also worth saying something about the process as well. This recording today has really been co-designed, co-envisioned, co-led, co-created with and for young people who have been involved in setting the agenda really of what we're going to cover today. And it's about putting them at the center of youth, peace and security work. Here are the 5 speakers that we're going to hear from today. I'm going to say a little bit about them shortly. How the process is going to work like this. Each young person will have an opportunity to answer 2 particular questions. And then after they've spoke, another young person will have an opportunity to ask that young person a question about their work. The idea is that this is a space for co-learning and for sharing, an opportunity to learn from young people grappling with peace and security issues in different contexts, with the broader goal of learning from each other and the wonderful work that's being done in different places. Before moving and proceeding to these speakers, it was suggested by the young people that we provide a bit of a broader context for the youth, peace and security agenda. So in order to do this, I want to say a few words, and I've split it up into 5 different parts. So first of all, when we think of youth, peace and security, it's really important to start off by defining our terms. What do we mean by youth? Well, youth means different things to different people in different contexts. And at the same time, if you look at the UN, they define young people as 15 to 24. If you look at the African Youth Charter, 35, and then other contexts in Africa would be up to 40. One way of thinking about it is to think of young people, teens, up to 29. Youth and peace has always been an important agenda. Many of the leading philosophers, politicians, spiritual leaders have all spoke about the importance of engaging young people in peace and conflict work. Most notably, perhaps, Mahatma Gandhi spoke about the importance of, if we really want to achieve real peace in the world, we have to start with children and youth. One of the things getting in the way, and this brings us on to the second part, of achieving real sustainable peace in the world is the war system. What do we mean by the war system? Well, we mean this perpetual preparation of war and war itself. So how is it that the world is investing 2 trillion a year in preparing for war? How is it that each year the economic cost of violence right now is estimated at more than 14 trillion? When alongside that, it's estimated that it would cost 30 billion to end starvation on the planet and end hunger, and 11 billion to give everybody around the world access to clean drinking water. When you look at things in terms of numbers alone, a lot more is being invested in terms of preparing for war and war itself. In order to achieve sustainable peace in the world, we need to address the war system. And in fact, the United Nations has recognized this. When you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which there's 17, peace is one of them. It's number 16. However, as the UN rightly say, there can be no sustainable development without peace. There can be no peace without sustainable development. Part of the idea behind that is that in order to make progress on all of the other sustainable development goals, we have to address the issue of violence. And the largest, most destructive example of violence is, of course, the war system. So that brings us on to, having spoke about youth and the war system, let's think about the roles that young people play in peace and security work. Well, in the broadest sense, we can think of the role of young people in 3 different ways. Victims of violence, and that is true, there is research on that. Perpetrators of violence also, there's considerable work that looks at that too. Also, there's the many young people. The fact is, the majority of young people, the majority of time, are peaceful. So it's an issue, the fact of too much attention, has been argued, goes to focusing on, let's say, the young people as problems or troublemakers, rather than the positive role that young people can play. And this brings us on to the 4th role, the role of young people as peace builders. We know a lot less about the role of young people as peace builders, and we need to hear about their role that they're playing in trying to bring about more peace in the world. The good news is that this has been recognized. Over the last 5 years in particular, there's been 3 new resolutions brought out which broadly look at and make the case for every government around the world needs to step up their game with regards to meaningfully including young people in peace and security decision-making, planning, and action. Finally, however, there's gaps that exist. We know that more investment's needed. We know that young people are still not being included as they could be. And we know that there's definite room for more partnership work to be taking place. And that's in particular looking at intergenerational work between young people and adults. So hopefully that provides a little bit of a context for the discussion that's to follow. What's going to happen now is that young people will be speaking in turn on these 2 questions. Question 1, what do you believe are the main barriers and opportunities for building and sustaining peace in your context? And 2, what steps do you believe can be taken to move us toward a world beyond war? So with that in mind, we'd like to take this opportunity to invite our first speaker. I'm going to introduce them in turn. Our first speaker is a wonderful peace builder from Kenya, Christine Odera. She is the country coordinator and among the founders of the Commonwealth Youth Peace Ambassador Network, as I said, from Kenya, and representing the continent of Africa. And she's going to be reflecting on those 2 questions that we've just shared. So without further ado, I'm going to come off the shared screen and say thank you very much for joining us, Christina, and looking forward to hearing all about your wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil, and thank you for that great introduction. So while looking at barriers to peace in the African and Kenyan context, most of you might have known or know about the civil wars that happened here in Kenya, have happened here in Kenya and around Africa, being one of the barriers to peace. Civil wars, misappropriation of resources, and the proceeds used to undermine the justice system become among the biggest barriers to attaining peace here in Africa and in Kenya, to be specific. Because one, economic interest. A lot of Africans and Kenyans in this context are actually poor. And it is said that a lot of Africans live under $1 a day. And so we're just looking for an economic capability that will make sure that we at least can sustain ourselves. Secondly, cultural values. We have a lot of ethnic marginalization and human rights violations that happen within our countries. And then the third thing I'd say is the power of the government to control the countries has also been quite conflicting, because we're having a lot of issues of corruption and bad governance that then act as gaps and loopholes towards achieving a peaceful countries and a peaceful continent in this particular context. And so these three issues, economic interest, cultural values, and the power of the government to control its countries, remain the biggest barriers to attaining peace in Africa. And if these three are actually harnessed, then we will be on our way to achieving a really peaceful Africa. The other thing will be the youth exclusion. Can you imagine? According to Worldometer, the median age in Africa today is 19.7. In 30 years' time, that is in 2050, it is forecasted to be at 24.8. Meanwhile, we should be commemorating the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. That is 10 years from now. The median age will be 21 years. And so this is to say that young people cannot afford to be excluded in this discussion when it comes to national building, because this is the population that is the most in these countries, and this is the population that has the energy to safeguard the socioeconomic sustainability of Africa. And so we really need to make sure that the vast majority of these young people who are now afraid of their future and are really worried about what comes next. And now after this pandemic, everybody is worried. Everybody is losing jobs right, left, and center, and we don't know. We're just fearing for our future. And if the government would really bring us on board and listen to our grievances as opposed to seeing us as threats, then we will be moving closer to achieving peace and a peaceful, a sustainably peaceful Africa. And I'd like to urge our governments to help us help them prevent pandemics that cannot be seen. We've already experienced pandemics that can be seen, but who knows what the future holds if the pandemics are going to continue. So please help us help you. And also, what do you want to be remembered for when you leave office? What will history judge you for? So please, I urge all our governments to make sure that the youth dividend is really taken care of, because we also just want to make sure that we are providing a safer future for ourselves and our children who are coming. Onto the steps that should be taken to safeguard some of these loopholes to advance sustainable peace. It is sad that the civilians have at least 530,000 firearms, between 530,000 and 680,000 firearms that are not documented, that are used for all of these civil wars that are happening to cause a lot of harm and violence within these countries. And so now that the world is moving towards digital and technology, then it's an opportunity and a gap to be filled. And by having a digital literacy as a skill is a must and a step towards us achieving a world beyond war, because this is not only going to be helping us have the ability to just join internet or to join social media or Zoom, but it's also going to help us navigate the security, the privacy, and the safety online and in our interactions with all the technological advancements. And so by generating things like digital IDs on licensed guns holders, we'll be able to make sure that a lot of these firearms that have been circulating will know the holders, the handlers, and the traders to track the weapons and know when it was actually fired and where. Then we can be able to manage some of this ammunitions in the urge to silence the guns in Africa, as it is the current African Union theme for this year. So the other thing is we could get drones with intelligence system to sweep and aerial surveillance with the aim of weeding out illegal firearms. I mean, this is technology that is already happening. So this is an opportunity for us to actually tap into these resources. And we have the young people to harness all this technology. And lastly, as I finish, I'd like to mention that we need to use emerging technologies like blockchain to manage records at key institutions of justice, and to use them for smart contracts too. It's doable. We have the young people with the capabilities and the know-how to do this thing. And so here are a huge bulge of young people who are not involved directly, and they're just asking for all these opportunities. And I'm very sure once a young person has that opportunity to economically empower themselves, a lot of other people will be economically empowered to make sure that at the end of the day, we have a safer and prosperous Africa. I thank you so much. Back to you, Phill.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Green, for a very expansive analysis and reflection on the context-specific issues facing you, particularly in Kenya, but also more broadly in Africa. So as suggested, after each person speaks, one person will now ask Christine a question based on what they've heard. So can we invite the first person to ask the question, please?
Yes, I'd like to question Christine. May I? Cool.
Yes, please.
So, yeah, great, Christine, great. So my question to you is there any initiative taken by government or the local leaders in Africa to engage youth in peace building activities?
That's a really great question. Thanks, Laiba. Yes, so I'd like to be specific to the Kenyan government here. And in 2019, we actually reviewed the youth policy, and we're calling it the Kenya National Youth Development Policy, which is actually a step towards making sure that youth issues are being mainstreamed and taken into consideration into the key government holdings. So this policy is also going to make sure that a lot of young people are included in trade, in national building, in cultural activities and whatnot. And the other thing we saw, especially within this pandemic, is the government actually had some funds to make sure that people in music and arts and in the entertainment industry were actually given some funds to help people just come out of the trauma that was happening with the pandemic. So we're already seeing the government actually putting some money into addressing some of these issues. And the other thing is within the education curriculum, we are having a lot of secondary schools having drama festivals. And these drama festivals, some of the skits that are showcased actually depict what is happening within society. And one I remember is in 2013, we had a girls' school in the Western region in Kenya come up with a drama skit called the Shackles of Doom. And Shackles of Doom was actually speaking about the recently found oil in the northern part of Kenya in a place called Turkana. However, the drama was depicting a lot of tribal, ethnic biases. And so the education system was like, no, we're going to disqualify this school because it is depicting a bad picture of what is happening to the country. So we're seeing a lot of government inclusion in all of this in a soft power way of just introducing a lot of also young people into the sphere. I mean, at least they're doing something. Thank you.
Lovely.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for a very wonderful question, Laiba. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to our next speaker. And in order to do that, let me just say a little bit about our next speaker. So our next speaker will be Sayako, Aizeki-Nevins. And Sayako is part of the Westchester Student Organizers for Justice and Liberation. She's part of that. She's part of the co-founder, board member, etc. And she's also a World Beyond War alumni as well. So Sayako will talk about the context of peace work and war abolition work in the context of the US and North America. So thanks so much for joining us, Sayako, and yes, please take it away when you're ready.
First, I'd like to say thank you, Phill, and everyone for inviting me to be in this space. I feel really lucky to be able to hear from everyone and engage today. So in the United States, the sanctity of the military as an institution is the largest barrier for peace, because not only is the military budget essentially untouchable in the sense that the US has the largest military budget in the world and it's only growing, but the military is also ideologically untouchable. By and large, criticisms of the military are met with a lot of scorn from people. Many people see calls to end militarism as personal attacks on patriotic beliefs, attacks on people who served, or even attacks on democracy. And a lot of this sentiment about the sacred nature of the military stems from our education systems. In public school, I've been taught about war in a very uncritical way and from the perspective of the US spreading democracy. And the military is also allowed to recruit in our schools. At college fairs and other school events, the Navy and the Army have tables where they attract students with the promise of free college, free healthcare, and a life of travel to different countries. And this sounds very appealing to someone my age, but these images are actually really misleading. Many of these youth in the military are sent to foreign countries to become involved in wars that they have no investment in, wars that ultimately further US power at the expense of other nations and of the people the US sends out to fight. And people in the military are reported to experience increased mental health risks, including stress, substance abuse, and suicide, with the worst effects seen in youth, unsurprisingly. And despite these horrors, the youth are constantly presented with positive images of the US military. So it makes a lot of sense that as a society, we aren't critical of militarism. And if we are really to challenge all of these issues and war and militarism as a whole, we really have to seek ways to educate the public, beginning with the youth. And for me, the presentation of true narratives demonstrating the impacts of war, how it separates families, devastates the environment, and in the US is a product of historic imperialism, has been really eye-opening. And I really think it can be eye-opening for many other people my age too. So a group of my peers and I are working to change the history curriculum in our school that perpetuates idealistic notions of the US military and presents students with whitewashed colonized narratives as a whole. Our school district, I would say, is definitely more responsive to student demands than others in our area, and our administration has agreed to create a student curriculum committee where students will discuss their suggestions for our school curriculum. But even though this work hasn't begun yet, we're already anticipating a lot of pushback because there's only so much that we can alter in our school curriculum without deviating from the state mandated work. And so in order to combat this issue, some tactics that we can use are bringing in speakers, like a World's Beyond War chapter leader, for example, or asking the school to implement anti-racism workshops. But on a larger scale, one example of wonderful youth organizing around demilitarization in the US is a group called Dissenters, and they're a national group that's building local teams of young people all across the country to force elected officials and institutions to take money away from war and militarism and reinvest them in community needs. And especially in a militarized imperial nation like the US, their exposure of how the elites profit off of endless war is really staggering to hear. But I would say that, unfortunately, the youth peace movement in the US is not as visible as it needs to be in order for the change we want to happen. But there are already many existing youth movements in the US that are very visible and are really growing rapidly, especially in relation to climate justice. These strong youth groups could potentially organize and educate around implementing systems for peace and justice, because war, militarism, and climate change are really interconnected. And there's also a powerful growing anti-racist youth movement in the United States, one that could also potentially organize around fighting the US's involvement in other countries with regards to imperialism, which is tied to racist ideology in many ways. So overall, if we start from the ground up and really work with youth to change their perceptions, who have the honesty of mind and their bravery to challenge unjust institutions, we can really work towards a just and sustainable peace. Thank you.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you, Sayako. Thank you so much for another interesting context-specific reflection. And at the same time, I can see some themes running through both of the speakers at the same time. So it's going to be really interesting to hear the other three speakers. So as per the last conversation, can we please have the next person to ask Saya a question, please?
Yeah, hi, Saya. That was really great. Thank you so much for giving us this perspective and this outlook. There's elections happening like in 3 weeks, 4 weeks-ish. How do you, and obviously, I mean, in any case, like elections always have a consequential effect on like policies afterwards anyway, but with this particular one, like, how do you think that the results are going to affect your work and your campaigning? If either one wins.
Thank you, Mélina. That's a really good question. And I don't want to sound too dire, but I really think that militarism is so entrenched in the United States that with the candidates we have now, either way, it's going to be a very tough situation with regards to really addressing militarism and building peace. I will say that if Biden is in office, he's gotten a lot of pressure from the left already, and I think he will be much easier to push to address some issues with militarism. He has really campaigned on how he does not intend to defund the police, which is tied to militarism, and he has made no indication that he will be interested in defunding the military in any way as well. So I really think the work with youth and with organizers on the ground needs to continue, because we need to kind of find any way we can, any way in with the government to really challenge these institutions. Either way, I think it's going to be very difficult, but we'll keep up the fight.
Yeah. Godspeed. You got this. And thank you for the answer.
Thank you. Great question, Mélina. Thank you. And wonderful, honest response that kind of gets us squared away with the challenges that we face. But that is the kind of reality check that we need, right? To be real with the situation and the challenges that we face moving ahead. So thank you for that. Two wonderful speakers. So let's look next at who's going to be speaking next. And our third speaker is Alejandra Rodriguez. So Alejandra is from Colombia, and she's part of the Rotaract for Peace and Voices Leaders, Colombia Foundation, and she's based in Colombia, and she's going to be reflecting on the issues and the questions that were posed related to Colombia and perhaps more broadly related to South America. So thanks for joining us, Alejandra, and please take it away.
Hello to everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you. It's really interesting to hear you and know your points of view. So answering the questions, in my point of view, the biggest barrier we have in South America is inequality in every sense. There are no guarantees for free education, basic needs covered, among other things. So in Colombia in particular, we come from more than 50 years of violence in a civil war between the government and illegal groups, which has affected all citizens. With the peace agreement signed 4 years ago, new opportunities have opened up to live in an environment of peace. However, the current government has lowered the budget for this, increased the budget for the military, and the purchase of arms for the police. In addition, there have been 62 massacres this year, more social leaders have been killed than in 2019. And in the social protests, there have been strong confrontation between citizens and the police. So they are looking for a reform to regulate these protests, which puts people's rights at risk. With all of this scenario, as a young woman, I must say that I'm afraid of what might happen. My role as a peace builder is very complex in a country where you are singled out for opinion, and yet I think I have a lot of hope that something positive will happen. Therefore, I would like to highlight 3 important points from what has been happening lately. First of all, I think despite the fact that it is a divided society, I see many young people and the general population united fighting in different ways to promote the culture of peace, to fight for their rights, and to make themselves heard. There is a population that is awake to what is happening, and this generates more and more empathy. Second, I think a sustainable process have been opened or strengthened in war-torn communities. Among Colombians themselves, we are generating projects that, for not financed by the government, generate positive impacts. And third, it is important to understand that now, thanks to the signing of the peace agreement, Colombia has the eyes of the international community, and everything that has been hiding is coming to light, and we are learning our true history. To put in another way, the international community is generating pressure to the government to comply with the peace agreement. So I think this involves a number of steps that are important to keep in mind. First, I need to study our history and also study the best ways to build a culture of peace in our countries. The best strategies are those that are adapted to our context and respond to our needs. Then I believe that spaces for dialogue and reflection must be generated where there is a special moment to create solutions and involve the entire community, including experts and social leaders. When this is done, we as young people are in charge to create, maintain, and replicate this culture of peace. So it is important that we learn and develop tools that allow us to work integrally and leave violence aside. To do this, we need strategic alliances, and the international community can be a great help in achieving our goals. But without doubt, the most important thing for me is to develop, with all that was said before, empathy, reconciliation, forgiveness, a new way of understanding reality beyond word, and a sense of respect for myself and others. So I have to emphasize one fact, and is that in the United Nations Development Program and the United Nations Volunteer Program here in Colombia, through the project Youth Volunteering for Peace, held the first meeting for the exchange of youth experience in 2017, which has resolved some important points about how young people could be more involved in this process around the country. Although I couldn't be there, I found this point really interesting, and I want to share with all of you. First of all, it's important to have training schools of political leadership and citizens participation for young people. Also, it's important generate spaces for participation. It's really necessary to be heard and to hear young people. We have to create opportunities for youth employment and self-employment. Also recognize the work of young people, because as I said before, we have a lot of projects going on and it's important to recognize them. Also investing in peace and security research focused on youth, because we are being threatened by some groups, and it's important to keep going on these projects. Also, we have to include contextualized and flexible models in educational training. These include that none of us has been studied like in a formal way the peace building, but also in an informal way, and it's important to recognize it. And also we have to have a state accompaniment in all of what I said. So those were my points, and thank you so much.
Wonderful, thank you so much, Alejandra. So as per before, who would like to ask Alejandra a question this time?
I will. Great presentation, Alejandra, and we share that inequality issue even here in Kenya. So I hear you, I hear your grievances, and oh my gosh, I hope we could collaborate and just see how to then bring that synergy between South America and Africa together. But my question would be, to what extent have young people, being the resilient population in Colombia and South America, been able to come together to organize themselves to address some of these inequality issues?
Okay, I think the role of young people here in Colombia has been really important because we are organized. We have a really strong student movement here in Colombia. So that is really important because we are who protest in the streets. We are who, I don't know, put in the table these topics for the government. I mean, we are not afraid to say the things that have to say. And that is really important. Maybe we as young people don't understand how world works, and that is really fine because we are not afraid to say the truth. So we have a lot of things to say what we want to say, and it's not also by scream or something like that. We have art, we have cultural groups, we have music. And it's really important to support these kind of initiatives that express what we feel about our country and about our necessities. So this put, as I told you before, in the table these delicate topics, and it's important to recognize them. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you so much for answering, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you. Another great question. Thanks, Christina. Another great response, Alejandra. Again, we're seeing some interesting patterns, you know, in terms of the role, the inclusion, exclusion of young people, the importance of education. Christine spoke about the importance of arts, and Alejandra, you brought that up as well. All three of you have brought up the role of the military in all of these cases and the importance of education. I think, Alejandra, you stressed importantly the necessity and the need for peace building work to be contextualized for each particular place, and I think that was a very good point that you reinforced there. So thank you for that. Now let's move on to the fourth speaker, and the fourth speaker will be Mélina Villeneuve, and Mélina is the research director at Education, and you could say maybe a little bit about that. Hopefully I've said that okay, Mélina, and is also the head of communications at the Women of Colour Advancing Peace and Security UK chapter. So Mélina, origins French, DRC, and currently in the UK, so very well traveled, like many of our young people. So thank you so much for being with us, and yeah, in your own time, in your own way, please, Mélina, please feel free to share what you would like to share with us.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on this panel, and thank you to all of those who have spoken already before. These are great speeches, and I feel incredibly honored and blessed to be on a panel of such amazing people from all across the world. But yeah, so my name is Mélina, and I'm the co-founder and research director of Demilitarise Education, or Deducation for short. You were close, Phill. But yeah, it could be difficult to read. And basically we're a community and a guide for modern day peacemakers, guiding universities to push for world peace. Our main campaigning focus at the moment is getting universities to divest from the arms trade in order to effectively demilitarize their education. Because when we think about how to achieve peace, by we, I mean our collective consciousness as a society, the idea that usually comes to mind is that peace is the absence of war. And that's not necessarily false, but there are definitely, there's 1,000,001 actors at play when it comes to creating, sustaining, or even ending conflict. And one of these is our higher education system, because, universities at the end of the day are very much complicit in the arms trade and in the research and development of weapons that come out tomorrow. Why does this happen at a university level? Because universities are filled with people that have young, fresh, bright minds that are looking for, the next big thing. And what's better than a young, bright, fresh mind to, you know, to get innovative ideas. There's three ways in which universities and the arms trade coexist and interact, and effectively those are the three kind of barriers that we see in that context. We start off with research projects. Universities will usually get commissioned by like a company to do research for them for the next product that they will unveil. And as I'm based in Manchester, and so is education, we mostly look at like the University of Manchester as our example. In 2019, the company BAE Systems, which is like a British multinational defense company, they unveiled their Magma drone, and it's lightweight and it's super cool because it's like revolutionizing aviation, blah, blah, blah. And on their website, they very proudly say that, you know, Magma is a great example of how collaborating with bright minds at British universities can deliver groundbreaking research and innovation. Our partnership with the University of Manchester has identified cutting edge technology, in this case, flap-free flight, and turned what began as a feasibility study into a proven capability in just a number of months. So you won't find that on the university's website because that doesn't look good, but you will definitely find it on the company's website because that looks really great because they're, yeah. And so, you know, they clearly recognize that themselves, and the research and development aspect of arms manufacturing would be heavily stunted if it weren't for universities. The problem isn't necessarily that this research happens, it's more that they were fed the idea that this is only to be used in like civilian settings, when we know that it could easily be then turned into like militarized products, essentially weapons. You know, my question is always like, do these students know that they have a helping hand in creating the next generation of weapons? If they are fully aware, like, is this something that they really want to like continue working on, or is it just that they're being funneled into that direction? The second barrier that we see, which goes from like this research stuff to this second barrier, is the fact that you know, you'll have your engineering students that will be funneled into, again, like graduate schemes that they can't really say no to. Because you finish university, you're in debt, you're in a job market that is basically dry, and you have this company that's now telling you like, you have all the skills that we need, here's this really amazing salary, and obviously this is a really great opportunity for your career. Not many people have the luxury to refuse that. And the same way that Sayako was saying that at college fairs they have Army recruitment, they also have these arms companies at career fairs at the university that will, same thing, sell an idea of like, you're working on really exciting new projects every day, blah, 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 it's gonna be really great. When in reality, they become a cog in the entire military industrial complex and everything that essentially fuels war today. And you know, when a university like Manchester promotes these companies and this industry to their students as viable, they're actually going against their very own ethics and their socially responsible policies. Because yeah, there's no conflict without the arms industry, like, period. And the third barrier now is the fact that there are investments from universities into the arms trade, which is something that is tricky to fully show because as huge institutions, universities will usually have like external fund managers. And so they're not themselves making these direct investments or buying the shares. You know, they'll use this external third party company and, you know, they just get the return on their investment. There's no questions asked really about how did they get it? And, you know, currently, UK universities as a whole, this is a figure brought to you by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, but in the context of like Israeli apartheid, UK universities have over £450 million invested in companies that are complicit with Israeli apartheid. In the case of Manchester, I believe it's just over £5 million. And the issue with the investments is that a lot of these companies are dual use. So they'll have products or services that they offer that can be seen in a civilian light and can be seen in a civilian sense, but also very easily could be turned into something that becomes a part of the military or that's used in a militarized sense as well. This is the case, for example, with Caterpillar, who manufacture a bunch of different stuff that have to do with construction. And one of these things are bulldozers that can be armored, and those have been promoted as like field tested, but the reality is that they're field tested on Palestinian land and on Palestinians. So, this is a lot, right, to take into account, those three branches, those three ways in which this all works. This all goes to reinforce at the end of the day that like, this is very normal for education systems to have these kinds of things. If I had more time today, I would talk about like the drip by drip militarism that happens in primary schools, but like, I don't have the time. But by the point that you reach university, you don't even question it. And so, you like planes, you become an aerospace engineer, you get told that you're gonna work on this like drone project, you might not necessarily try and think, where is this going to be used, and it's unfair to our students that they have to suffer from the status quo in a sense, because their options and their opportunities get limited. If you're only ever told that you'll find a good job and a decent whatever in the defense industry, how are you supposed to look elsewhere? And as universities, we also shouldn't just be funneling, we shouldn't prioritize return on investment versus like actual innovation and actual like pursuing of how do I put this, of like mind excellence. We should actually be looking into ways that we can reinforce like sustainability and invest our time and our money in companies that don't profit from war, literally. All of this perpetuates a cycle of creating adults and individuals who won't ever question the militarized status quo. So where do we go from here? Because it's kind of scary. How do we exert our influence and our power? Because at the end of the day, like, we are the future, we're the leaders of tomorrow, we're the future CEOs, we are the future, right? And so we have a voice and a power to do this. And the first thing that we must do as a whole is actually realize that like the status quo isn't working, and it has only ever worked for like a very small percentage of people, whereas it's had devastating effects for everyone else. We cannot keep funneling money and students into an industry that like, one, is extremely polluting, as Sayako was saying, that two, perpetuates war and has a helping hand in creating refugees and refugee crises. And at the end of the day, three, it's not even about defense anymore. It's just about making those involved as rich as possible. We need to recognize the intersectionality of all of our issues. One thing that I've picked up from everyone speaking today is the fact that, yeah, there's common themes that run through them, because I strongly believe that the arms trade is the root of all of this. The fight for human rights, the fight for climate change, the fight for democracy, the arms trade has many eggs in many baskets. And the protests we've seen in the US in regards to BLM turning violent is partly because of a police force that's been heavily militarized. We can't let go off of fossil fuels because the arms industry runs on it, and therefore it's not going to go anywhere, because also the arms industry is crazy rich. And we can't have free and fair societies where politicians like essentially are actually caring about their people, because we have situations in which they're offered a great deal of money to buy weapons. And I mean, again, we don't have enough time today, right? But essentially, at the end of the day, like, divestment is possible. Leeds University 2 years ago divested from 3 military companies. And at the University of Glasgow, there's a coalition of student groups whose aim is to get Glasgow, you need to divest completely from companies that sustain conflicts abroad. So it is possible. It just takes a lot of organizing. It takes a lot of like all hands on deck. It just takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort. But like, we definitely can do this, because it's our future at the end of the day. And it's our planet and it's our world, and we can find ways to, achieving long lasting and durable peace. Because if not us, then who's gonna do it? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mélina. Another wonderful reflection on some of the issues related to peace and war, and you did a great job of relating it back to some of the common themes and patterns that you've seen. I think it could be made, an argument could be made that in terms of a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, grappling with today, can in different ways be traced back to the war system. To take one example, we're currently now experiencing different crises, right? Well, one is COVID right now, but we're also in the midst of two existential crises that if we don't get right, we won't have a second chance. One of them is climate change. Okay, so what's the relationship with climate change and and war? Well, if we take a look at who's the biggest polluter on the planet, it's the US military. So in order to address climate change, we have to look at the war system. The other crisis that we're facing is the nuclear weapons, which of course can be traced back to the war system again. So thank you so much for highlighting that. And another thing you've highlighted, which we definitely have to take you up on, is that you're right, there's not enough time here because we could spend hours and hours and hours, so let's hold it to it that we're going to follow up and have a round two of this because it's brilliant. So with that in mind, let's move on to our fifth speaker. And I'm going to introduce this person now. It's Laiba. So Laiba is Laiba Khan, another wonderful young person who is a Rotaractor and the District International Service Director for Rotaract in India. So Laiba's going to talk about the context of India and more broadly Asia. So thank you for being with us, Laiba. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gittins. First of all, I'd like to thank you for just inviting me for today's discussion. Now, before starting, I'd like to raise a question. What do you actually mean by peace? Is it respecting each other's diversity, justice, love, or something else? For me, peace would be an exotic moment without rush, when we all would be together in a sudden strangeness, beautiful strangeness of unity. To say a bit about myself, I have lived in India and have grown in diverse cultures. I am a proud Muslim girl who lives freely in India and yet proud to be living in India. But the more diverse India is, the more disparity exists. With disparity, I specifically mean economic inequality. According to the CIA World Factbook, there is just 10% of Indians own 80.7% of the nation's wealth. And the trend is going in the upward direction every year, which means rich are getting richer and poor are getting poorer. It has negatively impacted poor citizens' access to education, healthcare, and other resources. Thus, economic disparity is one of the major barriers in peace building within India. I'd like to quote the definition of world peace by Jody Williams here, which is sustainable peace with justice and equality. It is the sustainable peace in which majority of people on this planet have access to enough resources to live a dignified life, where people can have access to education and healthcare. But how does this make sense? Let me tell you. Because we cannot expect people to believe in peace when they are hungry, when they don't have any jobs, when there is such a huge discrepancy between developed and developing nations. For instance, this is the world right now. These are the people who have access to all kinds of resources and living a wonderful life. And these are the people who are living a miserable life and don't have access to even necessary resources. Our aim is to lessen this gap of unequal division of resources. Okay, so this is about India. Now moving forward, I am a Rotaractor and I feel wonderful to be called as one. Let me share a small story about from my Rotaract journey until now. It was my first district international service project. I had an idea, but I didn't know how to implement it. I was lost and nervous at the same time because I was new to all this stuff, Rotaract and this. So then I texted one district ISD Dinesh about the issue. And you won't believe that he guided me throughout the project. The project was a recent success because of the bonding I have made with people in Rotaract. I feel human relationships are not formed on conditions of boundaries and politics. They are formed because you just feel that deeper connections with someone's joy, someone's suffering. This is what Rotaract does. It helps in building long-term human relationships through service. It has helped me to form long-term connections rooted in love, fun, and care. Now I call all of them my Annas, which means my elder brothers. So to summarize everything, in my opinion, to attain world peace, we have to kill the seed of ego, communalism, inferiority complex, discrepancy in resources, and sow the seed of peace within each other's hearts. We have to engage youth in peace building activities. We have to start forgiving each other. Ultimately, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Thank you so much.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, that is such a wonderful statement. In fact, actually, I'm writing wonderful statements from all of you. They've been just, you know, mind opening. So thank you so much. Who would like to ask Laiba a question?
I would. Thank you so much, Laiba. Your words were really impactful to hear. I wanted to ask you a little more specifically, how is economic disparity in India affecting peace building efforts within the nation?
Okay, so thank you for the question, Saya. Now, as I said that there is a huge discrepancy between between rich and poor. Like day by day, rich are becoming richer and poor are becoming poor. So basically, poor don't have access to even basic, resources like food, education, and healthcare. So even I am a human, even you are a human. We have to, somehow we try to live. So when they don't have money to buy food for a living, then they tend to rob. They tend to do loot. So like there has been many incidents like related to loot in India. Some like the problem of records, which we had in Chambal Valley, which is a region in India, was and is due to the exploitation of economically weaker sections by rich. So like if and it all this happens basically in rural India. So whenever they cannot access the resources, they just tend to loot. They just tend to choose the violence as their path to attain something. So like there has been many incidents of violence between in India in the past, and even now it happens in rural India. Yeah, so that's my take for it. Thanks, Sayako.
Thank you, Laiba.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Saya. Let's go to Mélina, because I know someone's desperate to ask Mélina a question. So please go ahead and ask Mélina the question that you were going to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love you to ask a really important question for me, and I will give you an example what I want to mean with it. For example, here in Colombia, there is a very strong student movement, as I told you before, that has been charged with denouncing injustice, fighting for the rights of citizens, and creating intelligent alternatives to generate peace in their communities. This can be summarized in art, cultural events, and working hand in hand with the community. So having said this, I would like to ask you, what can be the key to sustaining this process, making them grow and taking care that institutions like the government do not end with them?
Well, thank you for your question. What's the key? There's many keys. Like it's yeah, there's a lot of things that need to happen simultaneously. But from a like student group youth perspective, I think it's just a question of like finding your momentum so that you can kind of keep doing the work and keep doing the research that you need to do without burning out and drying yourself out. Because obviously it's not even that it's difficult, but when you were talking about Colombia and you were saying that like some people have gone missing for kind of speaking their minds and bringing things to the surface, obviously that's a huge stopper to getting anyone involved and to actually keeping things rolling and going and creating that accountability. So I would definitely say first and foremost, it's like finding that momentum. And then second, I think it's really a question of educating those around you as well about these kinds of topics, because it can seem, you know, when my co-founder and I started education, I was like, there's no way we're actually going to get anything done, because this seems insane. Like, this whole industry is entirely political, and we're just two girls from Manchester. Like, there's no way. And I figured also it's super complicated. I'm not an economist. I'm not an engineer. Like, I don't know how I'm going to discuss these things. But actually, once you're able to break it down, or if someone breaks it down for you, it becomes something that's very easy to understand. And it becomes just how blatant, you know, things have been misappropriated and things have been misprioritized. I don't even know if that's a word, but here we are. So it is really, it's a two-sided thing of like finding your rhythm and finding your pace and finding your momentum, and knowing how to kind of keep it riding, knowing when to hold back a bit, knowing when to go in full force, and everything. And then on the other hand, it's also just, as you learn more yourself, educating those around you and holding these kinds of events and these spaces that are safe for people to come and to learn about these things and get themselves educated too. I hope that answered your question. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alejandra, for the question. Thank you, Mélina, for a wonderful answer. So that brings us to having listened to 5 wonderful speakers and 5 wonderful questions, and I feel like I could sit here kind of 24 hours, you know, talking with you all. So as we reflect on what's gone on, I think it might be worthwhile us kind of stopping and thinking about what was the purpose of today. Well, part of the purpose of today was to really provide a space, and that's a word that's come up a lot today, so thank you so much, everyone, a space for young people to really share and tell us in their own words what they see as some of the main barriers and opportunities for building and sustaining peace in the world, and some of the ideas around the next steps that need to be taken to move us toward a world beyond war. The process through which this was done is just as important as what you're watching right now, actually, because it's worth highlighting that this was a process that began with the ideas of young people, that was informed by, you know, what young people wanted to do in terms of the questions that were asked. We've been working together on this process, and it's a co-authored, co-produced, co-designed, co-led piece of work, which is really about putting young people at the center of preventing war and promoting peace. If we think back about the 5 speakers, the 5 young people, I think of like little nuggets of gold that was said in each of the 5. Overall, it's right that overall there was some wonderful themes that come out, which can be argued spread across all 5. So inequality was a big word that come out in different ways, in different contexts. Obviously, the role of young people being both included and excluded is an issue that needs changing. And Christine, in particular, spoke about the youth dividend, and in terms of the let's say inequality dividend as well needs to be addressed. But if we look at the peace dividend as well, research showed, in particular by the Institute for Economics and Peace, that there's a growing peace dividend. So while some countries, and let's say in Europe in particular, the region getting more and more peaceful, other regions are getting less peaceful. So how can we go about using that youth dividend that has been brought up today to help us move the bar and lessen the inequality dividend and strengthen the peace dividend is the big challenge that I think we're facing. In terms of each of the 5, there was some wonderful things brought up. So Christine again spoke about arms being, you know, one of the major barriers. One of the nuggets that come out there was this idea of help us help you, which is completely true. No viable approach in the future to sustainable development can be sustainable, can work without meaningfully including young people in the process. Help us help you. So that's one of the things that come out for me. Sayako spoke about a very interesting and let's say testing time right now in the US, and was posed a very interesting question about right now, you know, we're dealing with the elections. Did a great job in terms of centering the analysis on the role of militarism in perpetuating many of the world's issues that we see. And also at the end, you did kind of touch on in terms of the people that might be elected. It seems as though they're not too much peace orientated, and there might be a challenge there with regards to diverting attention away from the war system, which includes, and Mélina brought up this as well, policing, so how do we go about diverting attention away from the war system towards more productive activities, which is a challenge which Sayako brought up. Alejandra, another great job in terms of also paying attention to militarism and raising the point that actually more funding is being put into the military right now, even though we're thinking about the Colombia after 50 years of civil war is going through the peace agreement and the peace process. So again, militarism at the core of the issues being there. Something that came up there was this idea of hope, and I love that idea, and also space as well, Alejandra spoke about, and also the idea of being context specific, how the strategies and approaches should be context specific. In that context, Alejandra spoke rightly about the role of history, and how do we go about writing textbooks or curriculum in a way that do justice to the 50 years worth of civil war, which is a real interesting challenge moving forward, I think, for Colombia. Again, the role of youth will be central to that as well. And then next, Mélina, great in terms of focusing on another brilliant thing that came out was this idea of young, fresh, bright minds, which come out to me in terms of, the universities today. Not many people know. So I think it was kind of eye-opening in terms of what you shared with us, the role of the university in perpetuating and how they're complicit in and implicated in the war system themselves that not a lot of universities know about. In terms of young, fresh, bright minds, we definitely have 5 young, fresh, bright minds with us today that are not just using their young, fresh, bright minds, they're putting their words into action, because that's what we need to do. We need bright minds, and we also need action as well. So action alone is not sufficient. Words alone is not sufficient. We need both. So thank you for that. And then finally, Laiba, which is a nice kind of personal touch. I really appreciate you bringing that in terms of how you've become inspired to get involved with this work. And I think this will speak to a lot of other young people that are watching this. So thank you so much for sharing that. And you just kind of ended and kind of took my breath away, and so coined that, in terms of how can we move towards, the power of love and away from the love of power? Oh my gosh, what a lesson for us all, right? How can we do that? It's a lesson for us all to look at ourselves and think, how can we do that? So thank you for that. So I'm just blown away. And I think we've kind of achieved a task of enabling you to be put at the center and you share your perspectives. I'm aware that we've got about another, let's say, another few more minutes. Why don't we use this as an open space for you to ask any questions of any other young people, or put anything else forward that you would like to share with us today. And I'm going to go back to gallery here so we can all see us all. So let's use this couple of minutes. Over to you. How do you want to use the time?
I want to, we're having a little bit of an exclusive chat on the Zoom chat, but obviously I think we're all just very grateful to be in this space together and to have met. And I, as a sitting board member of an organization called Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, we are all women of color advancing peace and security. And I think that's pretty awesome, especially considering that, yeah, we're young people. I mean, that's it. So I just kind of really want to echo that, it is just so, thank you, Phill, for creating this space for us all to come and to share our views and everything. And thank you to everyone for, speaking their minds so greatly and brilliantly.
Thank you.
Thank Mélina. I'll also like to say that as young people, we've learned the art of organizing ourselves and coming together to form a collective front and to share our issues. And so if meaningfully included into some of these spaces that we're really passionate about, it's really a force that you cannot break. and it's here to stay. So all these governments and politicians do not have an alternative or way out but to include us. Because if they don't include us, then we'll include ourselves. And it's not just in Africa, it's a movement of the world. It's in Africa, it's in South America, it's in North America, Russia, India, everywhere. So watch this space.
I'd just like to echo what everyone's saying. I also feel very grateful to be in this space. It's really, the energy is amazing. And I've really learned a lot. And to speak on, Christine, what you were saying about we can't ignore the youth. Like, we are the movement based on truth. And we're just trying to get only true information, true narratives out into the public view. So we're fighting the good fight. So I feel very lucky to be with all of you here.
Yeah, it has been really amazing to meet all of you. And as I told Saya before, it is like really interesting to know new tools for the construction of peace. And it's really interesting because we have like different points of view because we were working in different things. So that is really important. So I wanted to ask you, I would like to ask you all, what motivates you to continue working on these issues of peace?
I think it's a wonderful question. Why don't we go to Laiba, and if you answer that one first, Laiba, maybe, and say anything else that you wanted to say, then we can take it in turns to for each person again to respond.
Sure. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Phill Gittins for organizing such a good thing. I am the youngest of all, I guess. And I think so much, good. I got to learn so much from all of you. You all were so much inspiring, and you already do a lot in your lane, and it's really inspiring. And thank you so much. It was really great to hear from you all. Now, the question was, what motivates us to work towards it, towards peace, right? So for me, whatever things we are facing, so it's whatever we said, we somewhere faced it in our life, in a past, and we don't want our future generation to face it. So that's the one thing I would say, that if I face it, and now I guess the youth has that power, like before people weren't so blind to fight for their rights. But now the youth, what I see, the youth is becoming more, outrageous. They are more, open to their thoughts. They wanted their rights to be fulfilled. And if they aren't, then they just speak out. And that's the one best thing which has come. Like, youth is crossing all the boundaries, and we are just fighting for our lives. And that there is nothing wrong in that. So yeah, that's my take for it.
Thank you. So who would like to go next? Should we go in the order of maybe how we did it before? So maybe Mélina could answer, maybe then Christine, then Saya, maybe in response to Alejandra's question, maybe.
Yeah, motivation's obviously like a fundamental piece to doing what we do. I guess for me, it has to do a lot with how I grew up. So my parents both worked for UNICEF. My mom still works for UNICEF. So I bounced around my whole life, and like my childhood years were in Cameroon and in Mali. And I think from being so young and seeing like the inequality that everyone had just seemed to accept as just such is life, was very already at my young age of like 6 years old, was already weird. And I think that like through growing up and having had, I recognize my privilege in that I've had very good education and everything. And, I think that from all of that, I got to a point now in my 20s where I'm just kind of like, things are not right in this world, and they literally have no reason to be this way, other than the only reason, I mean, for me anyway, the only reason why this is still the case today is because it's gone unchallenged. And it's just been, it's not that we've had a defeatist attitude or anything, but it's just that it's been accepted. And it's harder to envision a world that's different than try to change it, rather than just staying the way that it is, but it's obviously affecting people disproportionately. So I guess for me, that motivation is just the fact that, and as Sayako was saying, that, we're the generation that wants truth and that wants to just be told the truth. Like, what motivates me is knowing that, like, I want to bring the truth to the light as well. And I want to actually not necessarily expose, because I'm not trying to get blacklisted, but like, just actually, bring to light a lot of things that haven't been brought to light because people don't want it to, because it would disrupt the system. I think that was okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question, Alejandra. I've actually been reflecting about it. And for me, peace is the desire of every beating heart. And I remember growing up, I grew up with a lot of, going to school with a lot of refugee children who are running from Ethiopia or South Sudan. And in Nairobi, I remember just growing up, seeing a lot of inequality and just hoping somebody would come and do something. And then I challenged myself. I told myself, if I'm waiting for somebody to come and do something, I might be the person to come and do something. And so every time I feel like I don't have the energy to continue, I remember there's a kid somewhere who has been killed, or there's a family somewhere sleeping hungry because the parent was killed with somebody who did not even care what they were supposed to do or where they were supposed to be, or just seeing the government marginalizing some communities because of representation or their cultural beliefs. And so I just got tired of wanting someone to come and help, and decided I'm going to jump the ship and be the person to, come and speak about all these issues and bring others on board, so that we can form a force that can together work towards achieving the peace that we all yearn for. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants peace. If you're healthy and you don't have peace, are you even healthy?
Thank you again, Alejandra, for that question. Kind of a little bit from what everyone has been saying. I think for me, I've come from a place of great privilege in my life, in the sense that I'm largely untouched by the impacts of war as someone living in the United States, even though the US military is the largest military in the world, and it's inflicting all of this pain and destruction all across the world. So I think for me, my path began in my interest in climate justice. And then as I learned more about how militarism and war are greatly tied into the climate crisis, it really educated me and opened my eyes about how this injustice is just all over the world, and it's being purported in large part by the military of the country where I live. And so I feel a sense of responsibility that I can't just be complicit and sit here with my privilege and not act in any way.
Thank you, Sayako, thank you. And Alejandra, thank you so much for posing a really, really interesting question. And I think it's a very, very interesting question in the sense that all of us, there's tasks for everyone in peace building, but that's not to say that everybody should play the same tasks. So one of the questions that we should all be asking ourselves is, what role do I want to play? Some will be leaders, some will be thinkers, some will be doers, some will be strategists, some will be supporters, etc. So it's really, really important to think about, the role that we want to play, and that involves turning the mirror inwards and looking at ourselves. And actually in doing so, that might actually bring about the biggest change that needs to take place, in terms of it might actually involve a change of our own attitudes and our own ways of working. So you've all been critical, some of you speaking about your own privilege and where you come from. That's really important to understand our own positionality in terms of how we approach peace work. So I thank those that did come forward, and I myself am from the UK, so I acknowledge my privileges as well. So thank you so much. And Alejandra as well, if it's okay with you, I think you've kind of started something here. I think you've started something in the sense that we need to organize another kind of discussion and use your question as a guiding question for the whole podcast or interview, because I think it's such a wonderful question. You know, what brought us to do the work that we do? So so watch this space, everyone, in terms of the next up and coming podcast or recording. Meanwhile, I will finish with this by saying it is an absolute privilege and honor and pleasure, and I feel so emotional and so thankful to the wonderful young people here that have really keep me inspired, you know, to do what I try and do. You are the reason why I do what I try and do. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing these wonderful reflections with us today, which, as we know, was part of the Geneva Peace Week and the recordings created by World Beyond War. So thank you so much. And as Christine said, so let's finish with Christine's kind of, we're not going away. And as you know, so watch this space. So let's finish on that. And I think the other good thing that was brought about is that peace is a universal aspiration for everybody, bar none. It's not a universal reality, however. Another thing which is a universal factor is that no country, no context will reach peace sustainably without the meaningful inclusion of young people. So I think, thank you again, young people, for bringing that up, and thank you for sharing this space with us today. Thank you so much.